Back with us now via Skype, Pete Hoekstra, my old congressional colleague and former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Also joining us via telephone, Fred Flietz, a LIGNET analyst and chief. Gentlemen, we thank you both for being here. Now, we're going to return to a topic, Pete, that we touched on earlier, but it's worth, I think, getting more substantial perspective. Your fellow Michigander, now the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, told CNN that officials had, quote, other means to gain Bergdahl's release. He said, quote, they didn't notify Congress. I think they violated the law in two different places here. You've sent a message to every al-Qaeda group in the world that says there is some value now in that hostage in a way they didn't have before. You can't and you shouldn't negotiate with terrorists. Now, Pete, earlier you said, given the nature of these negotiations, in your opinion, the White House did not break the law. It appears the current chairman of the Intelligence Committee has a different assessment. I just wanted to get more amplification on what you were talking about earlier.
Sure, I mean, and that happens. But, you know, I think when you get into these kinds of sensitive negotiations, the president, as the commander-in-chief, has the opportunity and the authority to make these kinds of decisions. Hopefully Congress is kept in the loop. They're informed and those types of things. But, you know, that Congress would have a final approval or final say over this kind of presidential action, I don't believe that authority exists in Congress.
Fred Flietz, do you agree with Pete Hoekstra's assessment that the commander-in-chief has the latitude to get this done, or did the administration, in fact, break the law?
I think the administration broke the law, but I think the law is probably unconstitutional. I agree with Chairman Hoekstra that these laws are an unconstitutional infringement on the president's constitutional authority to conduct foreign policy. And a lot of these laws were passed against Republican presidents, and I sort of think Republican members of Congress should remember that and maybe not push this too hard.
All right, let's move from the battles on Capitol Hill to the rhetorical battles on the Sunday talk shows. National Security Advisor Susan Rice was on State of the Union on CNN with Candy Crowley. Here is the take of the administration's National Security Advisor.
It's an extraordinary day yesterday, and an extraordinary day for America.
Point blank, did the U.S. negotiate with terrorists for his release?
Candy, what we did was ensure that, as always, the United States doesn't leave a man or a woman on the battlefield.
Fred Flietz, given Susan Rice's unfortunate experience on Sunday talk shows, what is your assessment of the way she answered the questions and provided the White House spin?
Well, I think it was a typical non-answer by this administration to a pretty difficult question. Yes, we were negotiating with terrorists. I'm happy Sergeant Bergdahl is home. Maybe this was necessary in this instance, but what I'm concerned about is what else might be attached to this deal. Did we promise them something we're not being told? Maybe weapons, maybe not attacking? Was Iran involved? We're involved in negotiations with the Iranians on their nuclear program. They have ties to the Haqqani network, which was holding Sergeant Bergdahl. I think Congress needs to find out the entire story behind this deal.
And Pete Hoekstra, do you expect your successor, Mike Rogers, to call hearings to look more closely into just what transpired?
Oh, I'm sure they will, especially if Congressman Rogers, you know, believes that they broke the law. It really, at that point in time, it's his responsibility to call the kinds of hearings that are necessary and to peel back the layers in terms of everything that happened. In regards to Susan Rice being on Sunday morning talk shows, you know, I think it'd really be wise for her to step aside and not do those for the rest of this administration. Every time she gets on, I think she really puts this administration in a very, very difficult position, calling this an extraordinary day for America. Now, it wasn't a good day. I'm glad Bo's coming home, but, you know, America gave up a lot for that to happen.
Well, the logical follow-up question, Pete, is this: if she should step away from the Sunday shows, should she step away from government service altogether?
Well, that's a whole other debate. You know, the bottom line is the administration, you know, as soon as this release in the process. It was all about spin. Yesterday was spin, 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 trying to take a bad situation and put a, and try to make it look a little bit better. I think they failed. They failed miserably on that. But they focus so hard on the spin. What we really need to talk about here is the policy. I think Fred and I are in agreement. There's a lot of concerns about the policy that the president and this administration has just initiated. That wasn't Susan Rice. This was the president setting this tone and direction.
And speaking of the presidential direction, Andy McCarthy has an op-ed for National Review Online about this prisoner trade and our president's foreign policy. It's entitled, "Obama Replenishes the Taliban." Here's the takeaway quote. Plain and simple, President Obama has never had any intention to confront and defeat the Taliban. Obama's overriding goal has been to end the war, not to win it, as if it were possible by walking away to end a war that the enemy started and continues to fight. Fred Flietz, let me talk to you in the minute that remains. Short answer, please. What do you expect next? Does this embolden the terrorists? We're already hearing calls that Taliban sources say this is a victory for them.
I think they're on the right track here. What worries me is that the Obama administration is planning more rash and reckless steps to wrap up this president's term in office to prop up his dismal foreign policy record.
Well, we will take a look, especially when it comes to those nuclear negotiations with Iran. Fred Flietz of LIGNET and Pete Hoekstra, my old colleague from the House, we thank you for your perspectives in this discussion on this 5-for-1 swap that apparently gives some leverage to our enemies. Thanks very much for your time. We'd like your comments on this. Love for you to tweet those comments to me. At Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also email, our address, connect@newsmaxtv.com. And don't forget Facebook. You'll see my face again in mere moments.